stories of my guests who have taken risks, overcome challenges, and created opportunities. It's time to make the most of your new day. My guest today has truly made the most of each new day with a complete refresh on life. Now he's leading the way to help others who've been incarcerated or suffer with an addiction discover the power to change and make a better life. Founder and CEO of the nonprofit F5 Project, Adam Martin believes everyone deserves grace. He's built an organization of criminal justice reform warriors that are giving second chances to those who hustle, with the goal to change the stigma of felons and addicts to impact our community for generations to come. Well, Adam Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a new day. That's what I'm all about.
Yeah.
New days.
Yeah.
So it's great to have you here.
That's the name of the show, right?
Yeah.
The New Day.
New Day, yeah.
I
saw that car the other day, had license plate New Day. No idea who it is, but I took a picture.
Sue them.
I like it.
Send them a cease and desist.
I was just like, I see you. I like you. That's good. Yeah. Anyway, you have quite the story from where you've been to where you are now, and even like where things are going.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little background for those people who maybe don't know you, don't know F5?
Okay.
Just a little history.
Yeah. And let me say that it's an honor to be here and speak in front of your millions of viewers.
Thank you. Yes.
I only do shows that have millions.
Millions. Yeah.
So,
million subscribers, million viewers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus.
Yeah. So my name is Adam Martin. I started an organization called F5 Project. Originally, five and a half years ago, my intention is not what it is today, right? And so my intention is that I thought I was okay at speaking.
Okay.
Obviously not a professional speaker by any means, but I thought I had like a good enough story to go and talk to guys in jails. And that was the original intent, was like I was just going to start speaking and still have my full-time job. I started getting paid to do some speaking gigs. And so I wanted to start a nonprofit so I could honestly not have to pay taxes. It doesn't work that way, but or I was going to save up some money and I was going to start doing cool things like for instance in Moorhead, Romkey Park is on a very busy street, and there's a park there or whatever, and there's no
a pool.
fence.
I was a lifeguard there.
And there's no fence on 20th. And so I've always had this fear. I grew up in Moorhead, and so kids running out onto that street or whatever, having some kind of fence there or whatever, I was going to donate money and
get a fence.
That was my original intent. I never did it, it was
yet.
Yeah. Obviously there's not a huge issue with kids running out onto 20th Street. So I started a nonprofit, and I just started going into the jails. And while I was there, it's really hard to, it's different speaking at a conference than it is speaking in a jail, right? Because you're in there with the crowd, right? And so you can't not talk to people. And so when you get to know people in jails and prisons or wherever it is, you start to see people. Right. And I already knew that because I'm one of them. Right. I've been to jail multiple times.
Yeah. So a little background on that.
Yeah.
Too,
Yeah.
then.
We grew up in foster homes and juvenile detention and stuff. And so and I've never felt like I was an evil person. I think, I don't think I was a great guy by any means. I think I made, I think I was a good kid growing up that made some, bad decisions impulsive decisions. There's a lot of times I wasn't even thinking,
Sure.
And so when I, my life changed, I got sober, I got some good opportunities, worked at a good company, a tech firm, and things just kind of took off for me, right? And it hadn't been like that in the past. I had a severe drinking problem for probably from the time I was 13 until I was, 30.
Wow.
And I was pretty much on probation or in jail or in treatment that whole time too.
Wow.
And so when it all clicked for me, and I got blessed and got some good opportunities, it wasn't normal for me, right? And so I had tried getting sober from the time I was probably 20 until I was 30. So for like 10 years
Trying.
was just this vicious cycle of like getting sober, you know, getting a job, maybe getting a place to live, drinking again, losing it all, right? Like that, just that vicious cycle. And so when I finally did get sober and I got all these like even better opportunities than normal, I think I was like along the lines of like, man, I don't deserve this. Like if I really got what I deserved, I'd be locked up, right? Like really deep down, if somebody followed me my whole life or all my thoughts, all my actions, I'd probably be locked up for a really long time. If not life, maybe not the death penalty, but for a really long time.
Sure.
My opinion, most people, if they had someone who knew exactly everything that they've ever done in their life, would probably be serving some time.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the believer that we're all criminals, but a good chunk of us just haven't been caught. Right? There's just too many laws. There's no way that you can live a whole life and not break a law.
Well, we're all sinners for sure, you
Well,
know.
for
But
sure.
so yeah,
even
you know,
take it even a higher
yeah.
level, you know, because even you know, in Isaiah it says that even our righteous acts are filthy rags before God, right? Because He's so righteous, right? And so it's, you know, you could look at it in any like religious or even spiritual or law, like on the land or whatever. Like we all fall short, and so when I got, you know, what I didn't deserve, which was a good life, it was hard for me not to like try and find ways to pay that forward or go back.
So was this like 2016?
So I sobered up in 2013.
13. Okay.
So I was at High Point for the next few years, and I got a job there without, like, I was literally homeless.
Wow.
Right? Like I just got my apartment. Like I was like just coming off the streets. Put together a suit with some shoes, shined my shoes with banana peels at the Cenex gas station before I walked over to High Point Networks at their old office, and looked at the cars as I walked in to see, kind of gauge like what kind of level I'm at. And they were all driving really nice trucks and really nice cars, and just kind of level up from what I'm used to. And I'm about to walk in there and do an interview for an outside sales position. And I don't have a car, I don't have a license, I don't have a cell phone. I literally am going to the library to use, you know, email access just to get resumes back and forth and stuff. And I walked in there and they had like 6, 7 people in this interview, right? They knew I was a felon. Okay. They knew that part. They had ran a background before I got there. So I think that's part of why so many people were in the interview. I don't think any of them actually had a conversation with someone they knew was a felon, you know, and
how did you get that job opportunity then?
I had a buddy who worked there.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was also.
So he could vouch for you.
Yeah, he was also. He has the same story as I do, but he didn't go into his adult. He didn't get into the adult criminal justice system. Okay. So, like, we connected as like young, like we weren't teenagers. Like we were in our 20s, 22, 23 when we met, and so. But he had stopped that life around that time, so he never accumulated like felonies as an adult.
Okay.
And so it was easier for him to get into places like this. But we had connected through recovery, and I told him that I had gotten fired from another company. I almost named them. I was about to name the company that fired me. They fired me with good reason. I was like drinking on the job and stuff. And, but
it's all part of the story.
Yeah. And I told them that I got an interview at another company, which was a competitor of the company, High Point. And so when I walked into that job interview, I had another job lined up. I was just showing up because I had a lot of respect in the tech industry for High Point.
Sure. Right?
And so, but as like I was walking into that interview, they rescinded the offer because I had a DUI on my record, and they couldn't insure me or something like that. And so I was kind of, taken aback when I walked in, but I didn't tell them. I told them I still had a job offer. And anyways, long story short, the owner came in there. He had 2 folders. One was thin and one was thick, and he joked with me and said one of them was my background check, and guess which one it is. And then he ended it like Tom's a really good, like he's just a good, genuine human.
Yeah, I know
so
Tom,
he's just, he's like one of these can define who you are. this contract of where you're going or this background of where you came from. And it's your choice. And if it's like, if you want the weekend to think about it, and I'm like signing it,
Yeah.
you know, as he's saying, I was like, I'll take the job. And it wasn't like, it was, man, it was crazy for me because this was like a legit job.
Right.
Right? Like it was a legit sales job. Like it was a grown up job. And I didn't have grown up things.
Sure.
Like I didn't. And so I like told them, I was like, you guys know I don't have a car. I don't have a license. And they're like, well, how long will it take you to get back? And I'm like, man, if I save my money, maybe 6 months. And they're like, we can work with that. He's like, work with the engineers, work with the other sales guys. If you need rides to meetings, connect with them, hustle.
Yeah.
Right. And so I busted it. Like I did more in my first year than most of the account managers did in their first year combined.
I'm sure,
and it was all through phone calls and Zoom calls. And so I was like living like COVID life because I was, you know, because I couldn't get there. So it was, you know, so I was already doing that stuff.
Wow.
You know, so that led to, you know, 5 years later, I started F5 and
that started when like United Way had asked you to speak. Is that?
Yeah, United Way asked me to speak, and I got put on the front page of the Forum, and then that led to being a speaker at the jail, and then it turned into a regular meeting at the jail, and you know, I just felt my heart getting, like I found purpose.
Yeah.
Like I found purpose at High Point. They got a great family atmosphere, and I probably could have made a lot of money there, right? You know, having a good portfolio of businesses and stuff like that, and I was doing okay. And but I mean, no offense to the, you know, the executives and you know, Tom and stuff like that. Like when I was there, I was like making people who were doing okay or like well off like better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was a sales guy. So I got commission and then they got a chunk of it too. So I was like I'm not changing the world here.
Sure.
Right? Like, yeah, maybe cybersecurity, keeping people safe from hackers and, you know, they're connected to the internet, you know, whatever, right? Like they can store their files. But when I spoke at that event and I told my story, and more of my clients that I had at High Point reached out to me because of loved ones that were struggling with addiction than people reaching out for phones. Like I knew, like I just knew. So
like your purpose was more in, or it was there.
Yeah. And I went to Tom and I told him, I was like, I'll give you, like in my head, it was a year. I lasted, I think I only lasted 45 days.
Wow.
Before I left.
45 days.
Yeah. And part of it is that I got offered $50,000 to leave and start a nonprofit. What I didn't know is that it was a super corrupt, like, group of people that were never going to give me that money. And I left my job with the intentions of getting that money, and then they disappeared. And like now I'm like, you know, I basically just left my job. I don't have much in savings.
Yeah, so you've finally been like, you know, I know you used the word grace. So you've finally been extended this grace and got this job.
Yep.
A good job.
Yep.
And now you have like some stability in your life.
Yeah.
For probably once in a really long time.
First time ever.
Okay. First time ever.
Legitimately, since I left home when I was 18.
Wow. And then there's this opportunity that falls through then.
Yep.
But you didn't let it stop you.
No, literally the first opportunity I got for me to leave my job was a false
scam.
one. Like it was a scam. And to be honest with you,
the wrong guy.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't even know what their intent was. I haven't seen them since. I mean, it's been 5 years, so it was, you know, I know there's a lot of people that really struggle with the concept of faith and higher powers and stuff. And I don't think that, you know, my higher power uses, like, you know, like will legitimately put people in position to do things like that. Right. But I do think that things are created out of everything. Like, and it's a mindset, right? And so it was like I'm sitting in my apartment that I don't know how I'm going to pay for. My kids are in the other room. Like I have a car that I'm paying for. Like I have all these bills. In comparison, I would give my bills then compared to my bills now. Like I'll take that any day of the week. But at that time, like it was all relatively new, first 5 years of like being in recovery. And so, man, I was freaking out. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I just kept like, you know, researching nonprofits and like grants and stuff like that, and I wasn't even available for any of them because I didn't have any impact data, and I didn't have budgets, and I didn't have like a board of directors, and all this stuff. And so, man, I just took a bite of something every day is really the goal. That was what I've learned from Tom, is like, he's like, he wasn't looking for me to like make $1 million a day. He was looking for me to just sell something every day.
Yeah.
Like, that's a win. As long as you're selling something every day, that's better than not. And so I just looked for, if it was as simple as like doing a fundraiser on Facebook or connecting with a guy getting out of jail or whatever. Like, I just found things that I could get into to keep my hands busy and just continue to grow, and it worked, right? And so
F5, the meaning behind that, like, now it's so many different levels.
Yeah. Yeah. It's originally it was, I mean, for short, it was like felony 5. So I have 5 felonies, and it was my play on like words as to destigmatize, people with felony backgrounds, right? But also as like have you ever played video games and you can switch from beginner to medium to expert? It was
I don't think I've ever switched from beginner. But I've played them.
Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah. Well, I've always viewed that being a felon in the game of life is expert level.
Okay.
Right? Like, you got more barriers, you got more restrictions, you got more all that. So it was like, this was like my attempt as a reminder that like, I'm going to do that. This is what I'm doing it for.
Sure.
Just to make things a little bit easier for others when they come down this journey too. Like when they go apply for jobs or housing or whatever. And I essentially became the face for people with felony backgrounds in drug addiction and alcoholism, and so, and then Doug Burgum came around. He was like, "Oh, it's like the F5 key on the keyboard. It's like a refresh. Like you give a bunch of grace to people. Like you're just refreshing lives." And then that kind of took its own life of its own because
and
Doug
because you
said
came
it.
also from tech. Yeah.
Yep, and I came from tech. So
yeah.
it was,
I'm like,
so
wow,
he's right. It was a double entendre, but it wasn't until he said that. It was
like, yes.
initially felony 5. That's
right.
what it was. So I have a woman that I partner with on some treatment stuff, and she literally can't get past. She always says force 5. Like whenever she's talking about it, she's like, "Oh, we should go over to force 5," and I'm like, "It's F5 project, man."
Yeah, there's no force. Yeah.
But I think there's a TV show called Force 5 or whatever, and it's hilarious. It's like a Canadian, like, Dumb and Dumber or whatever. So, anyway.
You should get her a shirt. No.
I should. I would just say Force 5 on it.
Force 5, yeah. Oh, funny. So, you'd been through the system and everything. And so the main goal was to be able to just help other people coming out of jail get back on their feet, or actually meet them in there to let them know.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that one of the lost arts in our nation is mentorship, right? Like you can't even really get good mentors today unless you pay them a lot of money.
Right.
And back in the day, mentorship was just like apprenticeship. It was just a thing that people did, like when younger generation came and showed up and they just followed you everywhere you went, and they just watched you and shadowed you and stuff. And it's something that we've profited off in the last 100 years or so, or turned it into a profitable like coaching, or whatever they call it in different industries. And so I come from a recovery world where, like, the one thing that the recovery world did that they nailed was sponsorship.
Yeah.
Man, they have nailed it. Like, they do it for fun and for free, and it's just a part of their recovery. Like, you'll hear guys say that they do it because they want to stay sober, right? Like, that's
keeps them accountable.
Their mentee or their sponsee or whatever you want to call them is doing more for them than they probably are for the person that they're mentoring, right? That was how they spun it, and it was it built this huge atmosphere throughout the nation, right? I've not seen anything like it in anywhere else.
Right.
Church, business, networking groups, like there's always a line, right? And what I've learned with watching people in recovery is that line is very far. Like, you got guys calling you at 2 a.m. because they don't want to drink, right? It's life or death,
Sure.
right? And that's how they view it. So I'm like, man, like when we start this organization, we start doing that. That's got to be us.
Yeah,
We got to
like
be
complete
like
vulnerability.
Yep. We just got to be
Transparent,
one-on-one. Like you have me, right? Like we are in this together. And if you're going through it, we're going through it. And so that's kind of how we built whenever guys called us from the jail or if they called us from treatment or whatever, we just showed up. We didn't have housing. We didn't have, access to, reimburse, like nothing. We didn't have anything other than ourselves. And so we just showed up and like we'd take guys out to eat. We give them rides to their probation meetings. We give them, rides to job interviews or whatever. And then it's just kind of evolved from that. But that's kind of our basis, is that when anyone anywhere like reaches out, we just want to make sure that they're being helped. And so
Whatever that looks like.
whatever it looks like, as long as it's
at.
within the realm of like, being a good servant or whatever, and you're not just like being codependent or enabling.
Sure.
Or, you're not like you didn't take them to the liquor store. But I will say that there has been some times when guys are going through some really violent, detoxes and DTs and stuff, that I have bought a couple beers for a guy just to smooth it out for him, because he was having like a violent like detox.
Sure.
And we don't have a lockdown detox in Fargo. So it's like, half the time these guys just end up in jail because, they either get drunk or they're detoxing. They got nowhere to go. And the cops basically just have to take them to jail and charge them with a crime, when really all they needed was just to go to a safe place and just get the alcohol out of their system.
Right. Yeah.
So
now you guys have housing even.
yeah.
And now how do people even get involved in this? Is there like like that accountability piece of like they are getting clean, they are getting sober? What's that kind of like look like?
Well, that was our first kind of flagship kind of product, if you will, was the housing component. It was very easy to get into our houses. It still is. There's not a lot of red tape. A lot of guys move in before they even fill out an application. So it's, we just want to get people off the, not necessarily even get off the streets. We're not a homeless shelter. So it's, but if they're getting out of prison, we just want to make it as like super easy as possible, because, you're going to have to deal with family and probation officers and therapists and judges and, fees, fines, all that stuff. Like there's just a ton of stuff you got to deal with. So
plus a lot of times they'll look at your background.
Yeah, and deny you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so we just wanted to make it as easy as possible to get in and have a safe place where you can just kind of grow, like an incubator, if you will.
For time being, kind of.
Yeah. And we'll base it off your effort rather than your background. So, if you come in and you're busting, I don't even know if we can cuss here, but can I say ass?
Yeah,
sure. You should clip that. Guys busting their ass and like I tell guys all the time, there's a couple of different guys that come to the houses. You got one guy who comes in and he's just negative Nancy, right? No offense to women with the name Nancy.
My stepmom is Nancy. She's lovely. Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Lovely Nancy.
No.
Negative.
But, yeah.
Negative Nancy, and they just negative about everything. The probation officer, the way that the house is, that nobody does the dishes, and man, I can't tell you how much drama is surrounded by dishes. Like it is like whatever, but I get it. It's the same way in my house with, what I mean? Like nobody wants to do the dishes. And so, and he's just negative. And then you get the next guy that comes in, he's super hyper and he's like applying for 20 jobs, and then he gets a job, but then he doesn't show up to it. And then he's probably, meeting with therapists to like get his, medication regulated. And so he's just all over the place. And then, you got this third guy who comes in, and he's probably just like, the only thing that he really ever had an issue with was drinking. Mm-hmm. Like literally everything else is fine.
He likes dishes.
Like, yeah. He'll, but he has the ability, the chance of turning into one of those other two, if left unchecked, right? And so he's the type of guy that, of the three guys, the first two guys usually go back to jail, and I'll run into him in the jail and I'll ask him like, why are you here? I'm like, I caught a case. Or I did some meth, or ran into an ex-girlfriend. She had a boy or a guy with her, whatever, right? There's always something. And I'll usually tell him, it's like, that was the result. Mm-hmm. right? It was probably because you weren't willing to do the dishes. Like, if you can't do the dishes, you're not going to go to work, right? Like, that's where we're at. Like, that's not like a truth, right? That's not like an absolute. There's probably tons of guys out there that don't do dishes that go to work every day.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just saying that for, guys like me, like, it's the little things that lead up to the thing that we think is the real reason that we're there, And so the guy number 3 is the guy that understands that, right? He may even relapse while he's in the house. He may even have issues and problems and whatever, right? But he's the one thing that guy can always fall back on is that he's always willing to put in the work, right?
Right.
And I can work with that. I can work with a guy who's humble and willing to put in the work, no matter what happens.
Is that where that hustle comes from?
Yeah, hustle. So hustle, like the normal way to say it is hustle hard, right? We say hustle harder because I see a lot of guys give up like 5 minutes before it works. And so there's like just that little oomph. Wait one more day.
You've partnered with Midwest Mental Health, and so you guys will have a new facility.
Yeah, so we have our old office. So we moved out of our old office because it wasn't big enough, and now we're downtown. I've been told it's the off Main building is what it's called, and so it's like kitty corner from the Holiday on University North in First Avenue. And so our old building used to be like a couple blocks behind, what is that? Dairy Queen on, similar, area downtown. Yeah. And so, we moved out of there, moved into this building, and we've already filled it up. And so then when we did this partnership, we needed more space. And so we rented our old, so we have both those buildings now.
Wow.
And we just got new floors in there and painted the walls. And yeah, so we launched the treatment services on Monday. And this is like I come from the corporate world, so I like, cool names. So this is like the next generation treatment. And the reason I call it that is we're doing something a little bit different. I think maybe they do it in California or maybe a little bit of Minnesota, but there's like this emergent kind of industry called peer support or recovery coaching that's kind of, becoming, it's people who are usually not licensed, like a licensed addiction counselor, but they're people with like vast lived experience, both in like addiction and recovery, right? So like me, like I have a GED, not went to school for mental health or addiction, but I lived it, right? Then I got into recovery and I was able to stay sober. And what's the goal for treatment is that the goal should be that they want people to have long-term sobriety. And, that's why I went to treatment is because I couldn't stay sober. And so, man, nationally with like prison, we have a 75% recidivism rate, right? Like people, 75% of people that go to prison go back to prison within 3 years.
Wow.
I can't even tell you what I think that rate is for people who go to treatment.
Really?
I would venture to guess. 1, they don't collect those statistics for a reason.
Okay.
2, I mean, probably because of HIPAA and, stuff like that. But I know guys who have been, to treatment like 15 times, right? Yeah. And if that were a prison, here's a couple points of interest. 1, I think that he got that opportunity because of who he was. If he was a different person in a different world, he'd be going to prison. Okay? He goes to treatment because he has access to insurance, he has access to monies, he has access to whatever. It's like we've lived in a nation a long time where like the healthcare industry is like, you get better service the more money you have. You don't get that in prison. Prison, it doesn't matter how much money you make. You're going to prison,
Sure.
Right? Unless you're, a legislator or something like that, or a president, or whatever. And so, I bet if we collected those stats, I bet you that we have like probably a 90 to 95% recidivism rate when it comes to treatment.
Yeah.
Right? And we keep doubling down more money for treatment, right? And I sound like I'm probably cutting my feet from underneath me on this because I'm starting a treatment center, but I think we did it the right way. We built up the peer support function first and have 44, 45 staff across the state
Right.
that have lived experience that are helping people in the community already.
Oh.
So it was natural for us to like go up the river, right? Go backwards instead of forward, right? And build out the treatment services, and then kind of have this holistic approach where we have employment navigators, we have housing navigators, we have, you know, people who've gotten their kids back, we have people who were addicted to gambling at one time, we have people who you know, we have partners that are willing to rent to people with felony backgrounds, their own apartments. We got second chance employers. Like, we literally built out the aspect that is probably the most important to a person's recovery than treatment.
Right.
Because treatment is like 28 days. And then
That's
you're
it,
out,
yeah.
and then you essentially have the rest of your life, right? Why wouldn't we double down the money in that aspect more than treatment, or at least make it comparison, like, or comparable, or
Right.
whatever. And we don't. We just keep dumping more and more money
Into the
here.
treatment, yeah.
And it's because, you know, I'm gonna be honest, like, most of the people who are doing peer support are not well educated, right? And so most of the people who are going to the policy meetings, the legislative hearings and stuff like that are people who are very well educated and work in treatment centers because they can afford to pay them, right?
So right, so we have couple different levels here of like,
Yep.
this all sounds great, but what actually works is
Yeah. And we
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
stop treating mental health and addiction like it's a hospital. We have to treat it like a community responsibility and a social, like, illness, right? And what we have right now is like a catch and release program and treatment where it's just like we're treating them like they have a broken arm, and once we get the arm bandaged and put in a, you know, like a cast, and then we send them back out, like, with a broken arm, that's fine. There's nothing you really can do with that
will heal,
until,
and yeah.
it will heal, you know, but with addiction and mental health, it can't heal by itself. That's an ongoing thing. And if you don't have insurance and you don't have access to funding and whatever, you're just going to have a bigger and bigger homeless population and a bigger crime rate that's going to continue to happen. And so getting tough on crime is literally the worst thing that we can do for victims and for people who are committing those crimes.
And then you're running for Cass County Commissioner.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd see your name on a ballot?
No, definitely not.
So how did that come about? just you know?
Man, it's the same as F5, right? Like, when I got into the nonprofit world and I saw that, you know, my experience in the nonprofit world, as a consumer, like, or as a client, is it was almost like I was tokened, right? Tokenized,
Okay.
right? Like, I'd be a part of these nonprofits, and they'd be like, "Hey, we want you to get up at the microphone and tell your story," right? And I tell the story,
Sure.
and then they get a bunch of donations, and then I just go back to my bunk. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
Like, I was just kind of treated different. I'm not saying all nonprofits are like that. I'm saying that was my experience, and that was part of the reason why you're not going to see a lot of, like, people who speak on behalf of F5 that, like, if they are in the houses, they're being paid to do it,
Sure.
right? They're not just getting discounts from their program
Right.
fees. Even that would be more than what, you know, we just did things differently, right? And what I was seeing is that most of the commissioners and legislators and stuff they probably represent the districts that they're from, but they don't represent all of us. And there's a lot of people that are not being heard.
Sure.
And my, you know, platform, if you will, is that, like, you know, our commissioners and our legislators should be leaders. They should be out in the community, leading the community, and not making decisions behind a desk.
Yeah.
And we elected them, right? And I would love to see, and I'm a big proponent of leading by example, right? And then, you know, it might be a little easier for me because I'm already trying to do that stuff, and now I'm, you know, maybe if I get elected, it's just gonna come together.
Right.
But I think that we're in a place now that we need leaders more than ever. Like, not people just taking
By
sides.
example, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Doing the work.
you know, most recently we had, you know, a shooting a police involved shooting, right? And it is really separating our community between multiple groups, and everyone's just kind of taking sides, right?
Yeah.
The problem is we had something really traumatic happen in our community, and there needs to be healing
And come
on
together.
all sides,
Right.
both for the family of both, everyone who is involved, right? And it just seems to be that everyone just wants their justice, right? Which is 100% I agree with. But we got to remember that, like, there's a lot of people hurting in this community, whether they're homeless or unemployed, mental health, police involved shoot, like, it's everywhere. And I think sometimes we just really narrow our scope, that we just want a quick fix for a lot of things, and then move on to the next thing that's going to take our attention for the next 15 minutes.
Right. Yep. Another
You know.
distraction. Yeah. What would be like some of the best advice, either that you've been given or that you'd give someone else that maybe is an entrepreneur and wants to, or maybe isn't an entrepreneur, either way,
Yeah.
that they just want to make a difference, make an impact?
Yeah. Well, let's keep it to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Like, so I speak at NDSU every once in a while to the entrepreneur classes, and I go into prisons and talk about
That's right.
entrepreneur. And I'll tell you, if I had to cherry pick guys that I wanted to teach, like, what I do and how I do it, it would be all out of the prison. 100%. A couple different reasons.
Yeah.
They understand that no isn't final, right? Like, when they've been told no their whole lives, and they're still fighting.
Yeah.
They're still hungry, right? And when you've been handed everything, or you've not dealt with being told no that often, or everything's just, like, right there at your fingertips, right? Like, you just kind of develop, like, when things start to not go your way, you kind of give up, right? I haven't met a lot of, or they just can't think outside the box,
Sure.
right? Like, I've met guys in prison that sold, like, drugs, right? And took the highest level of risk in the community that they possibly could to make the maximum amount of money that they probably could, right? That's like super illegal criminal activity, but it's the same thing, just a different industry,
Sure.
right?
So if we can put that energy into a,
They ran
Yeah.
enterprises. They had a marketing portfolio. They had to figure out how to communicate to people without using, like, things that can be tracked. Like, they figured it, like, that little point in your brain that figures those things out is the same thing that entrepreneurs use. And that's not like, you can't be taught
sure.
that. And so if there's anything that I would try to relay to people, is that drop your expectations, drop the idea that you're going to make a lot of money, fall in love with the process and the journey, and fall in love with failure.
What would be your biggest best? Is that a thing? Failure?
Oh, my biggest, yeah. Man, I had failure before I got sober, and then I have failure now. My biggest failure before was not being there for my kids.
Okay.
Like, that is by far. Like, everything work-related was money-related, and money can be
Sure.
earned anywhere. So it's, we live in a we live in a time where I can literally start a business from my phone.
Right?
Like, or I could, flip, garage sale items on eBay. Like, there's no reason that people that have good mental structure, right, like, that are getting the help that they need, or maybe whatever, that you can make money doing anything. Guys sold pet rocks in 1970s.
Yeah.
They were literally nothing. It was like they picked a rock, put it in a box, sold it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, some of this crazy stuff that you see in stores. Like, anyways. So, prior it was, not being there for my kids. Now my biggest, setback is that, like, as an entrepreneur, like, and a CEO, and having, like, that ton of responsibility, my family gets the leftovers. That's probably my biggest failure today, is that, like, it is really hard for me to detach from work.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
There's one kryptonite to that, and it's my daughter. Like, she is, my boys.
Just wrapped around your finger. Yeah.
She's I just walk in the house and she runs and she yells, "Daddy!" Like I've never had that before. Like I'm 40 years old. I got a 2-year-old little girl. I've had all boys before then, so it was something different. We get our nails painted.
Yeah.
You know, the other night she had her Ken doll and we washed his hair.
Oh, I was reading your
lotioned
post about
him.
it.
You know, she slept next to him. I had to give him a kiss.
You said you have
know.
your eye on him.
Yep, I do. He's got an eagle tattoo on his chest. I'm just like, I don't know, man bun Ken. You know. But I mean, even with her, like, there's so much. I think that every entrepreneur I've ever met, they really struggle with that balance, and you know, I wish I could just like have a normal 9 to 5.
But would you
job.
want that?
No, I would.
Yeah.
I think
I'd
I
go
would
crazy.
be a crappy dad if I did.
Yeah.
I'm just not built that way. I'm not built to just clock in, clock out, and receive a check, and you know.
Yeah.
So.
What would be the best way for our community to help support F5?
Well, I mean, we're launching the treatment services. So number one, if you know people that need treatment, we have access to state funds. We have access to helping people navigate through SUD vouchers. If they have insurance, like there's just multiple. Everybody who comes to F5 should have some level of care that they can walk away with, right? Another avenue is that whenever we do events like the 3-on-3 basketball tournament that's coming up soon, you know, check our website for those events and then volunteer or sign up for them, or the golf event, put a team together, right? Just become part of the F5 community and you'll find, you know, kind of where you fit or what you're, you know, supposed to do with that. And then obviously the biggest impact is monthly donors, right? $25 a month, $5 a month or whatever. It's a big deal. Like monthly operationals is the biggest killer for nonprofits.
Right.
Like, and I'd love to be stable enough to where all the housing component is being paid for through monthly donors, and then provide that, you know, that monthly newsletter to them, you know, like this is where your money went to, and here's the guys that graduated, here's the,
Cool.
you know what I mean? So if the housing structure was monthly donors taking care of that, I'd literally have no worries as a company.
Well,
All the
huge,
other
yeah.
departments are literally through state contracts and, you know, private donors who make it specific to that department, all taken care of. The housing one is literally our oldest program that we have and still is not paid for.
The hardest one, yeah.
On a month. It's the hardest one. Housing in North Dakota is literally the most difficult thing to ever get paid for.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for being the change in our
Thank you.
community.
Yeah.
And creating other change makers.
I came up with that, by the way. No,
Yeah.
I did. Gandhi did. But, you know.
Your name?
Yeah.
Gandhi, Adam.
Yeah, Gandhi and
Martin,
I, we used to kick it. So.
But really appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing with us your story, what you guys are doing. It's awesome. I love seeing everything you guys are doing.